This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
Welcome to Shed Talk.
Unveiling the conversations that thrive behind the shed, where authenticity meets unfiltered stories.
I'm Javier Tool, certified personal trainer and owner of Tool Shed Training.
And I'm Tammy Humple, professional educator and leadership coach. Today is episode 2 in our Return to Happiness series, and we're talking about how we view recognition today and how it enters into our values, impacts our decisions, and motivates us. And I have 2 quotes that we are going to start with. They're a little bit in contradiction to each other, and maybe one challenges the other. So the first one is by Dale Carnegie. He says, "People work for money, but go the extra mile for recognition, praise, and reward." And on the other hand, Taylor Hackford says, "But unfortunately, sometimes that affirmation creates a sense that you deserve special treatment and recognition in areas when we aren't so talented."
I like that one, and I'm going to get to it in a second, but I got to give you a ton of recognition from the first episode. So the first episode, you did amazing, and I was like, I need to go home and practice and step up my game, because I was watching it, and I was like sweating profusely from my forehead, because I was like, boy, she's really good at this. So there's some recognition right off the bat.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's get right to the point. So I think a lot of times recognition helps us be successful, and it helps drives us a little bit, but everyone has such a different perception. And I'm just going to go right into my early years, and I think it changes as we get older. So when I was younger and starting my professional career, I was really good at a lot of things, but I don't know if I was good at the whole picture. So I would do really well at a job. Somebody from another job would recognize that, and they would look at me like, "Javier, you should come work for my company." And that was it. That's all I really needed. And I think it was like a few years after that, I took a job at another place, and the vice president of the company sat down with me and said something to me. He's like, "Hey, I kind of looked at your resume. Looks like you've had a lot of experience." And I think what he was trying to tell me is like, "It looks like you have a lot of jobs." And he was like, "Do yourself a favor. For the next 3 years, just sit down and learn the job, learn the ins, learn the outs." And, I did that. I sat down, learned the people, learned everybody's name, learned the things with making sure that I knew the systems and all those things. And I started noticing something. People started coming through the door. And then I started realizing one thing. I didn't need so much the recognition from other people as much as I started getting recognition for my own hard work. And honestly, I stayed at that job until I started my own professional career outside of there. And I think learning your own recognition is a big thing, because it doesn't matter how much recognition you get from other people. If you don't have it for yourself, it sends you into a tailspin if you're not receiving it, or how you react to it when you get it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different ways that we can receive it, that people give it, and I don't know if we change. We talked a little bit about this last time, that we sort of evolve as we grow and move through our lives. And I don't know if we evolve in what we need, like you maybe did, right? With just moving from that somebody wants me to the next thing, and that was enough to pull you to the next thing, to really wanting to get good at what you do. And then the recognition wasn't so much about someone wanting you, but recognizing that you were good at it, that you had value. And I think that is so much more important once we realize what the feeling is that we're looking for, because that just someone wanting you to do the next thing is fleeting.
Right. So when I look at that, I even look at like the perception of that job. So there's a thing like one of my clients, and I won't use names, but he's going to know when I say this. Like, he's a very successful businessman. And he said one of the things that makes him, I would say, get recognition is by folding the laundry. And like when he gets done folding the towels, the job is done, because in a lot of our professions, the job is really never done. You're always working towards something, a bigger goal. So his recognition is when all of a sudden he has something done. And I think about that when I would clean my gyms. Like, I have a whole day of work, and all of a sudden I get to clean the gym at night, shut the lights off, it smells good, and all of a sudden my day is done. Sometimes that recognition is all I need, is to see it, to see the finished product. And I think that goes with with what you said, like with age, I think with growing in my job, because before I needed someone to tell me that it looked good. Like now I can shut the lights off at night and be like, wow, that's amazing.
And I think that's a recognition of an accomplishment, right? An accomplishment that is the end of the day, that you've done something important, but bigger, even for him, bigger than that, it symbolized something that he's accomplished with his career, not just the end of the day.
Right.
So that was bigger for him.
And I'll go back into that story again, because as we get in the personal side, that flip-flops into something else, which is pretty amazing. I think work-life recognition is sometimes easier to recognize. I think like if you have a job where your boss gives you recognition or you get a merit raise every year, I think that helps. Or if you have a coworker who is very friendly, who notices your work. But I also think if you don't get that recognition, sometimes you lose that drive. So I think work recognition is sometimes easier to see, but I don't think it's always valued as much, because if you're getting recognition if everyone's getting the same recognition, like is it the 3.5% raise that you might get every year, that, well, if everyone's getting it, is it really as important to me?
Yeah, so you're working towards that thing again, right? Even if it's monetary, which takes us back a little bit to what we talked about in wealth and security and what's important to us. But it's that external piece when it's I know if I work hard enough, I'll be rewarded with this raise, and it's the same for everyone. So when does the internal take over from the external, and how much do we how much of both of those do we need? Probably a little bit of both, right?
Right. I think about this in terms too, like I think in a job setting too, like if you work really, really hard, and I think maybe this is just me with my personal opinion. I throw my hands up when I say that, because when I was working an 8 to 4 job, I think sometimes I was looking for more of that recognition. And I don't know if I was as self-driven, because I don't know if I didn't have to be, because somebody was driving me a little bit. And if I didn't get the recognition for something I thought was really good, sometimes it would totally bum me out. Like I would be like, gosh, I worked really, really hard today, or I got a client to the next level, but no one really noticed it. But in this profession, now that I own my own business, I don't feel like I need that recognition as much, because I'm like, dude, you got to do it. Like you have to be able to push yourself and maneuver yourself. And I wish I could have taken this sense of who I am today and put it back in that workplace where I didn't have to rely on someone so much to be like, hey, I see you doing it and you're doing a great job, but you gave someone else praise, but you didn't see what I was doing.
I think that reminds me of, I was doing some reading this past week on greatness, and there was a reel that was advertising a book about greatness, and it talked about being exceptional or great or famous or a champion hasn't really fulfilled anyone. And I think therein lies the secret to recognition and learning to be self-affirmed, to recognize your own greatness. And then it makes me think about all that we do to get good isn't enough to be great. And even when we're great, that isn't enough if it doesn't feel like we're doing something worthwhile. So it makes me think about last time we talked, wealth isn't as great as recognition, and recognition isn't as great as being fulfilled and feeling like at the end of the day, you've accomplished something. When you fold the towels, you feel the sense that there's something bigger than you.
Right. This podcast is killing my future. I'm just kidding. Because last week, as we're sitting there and we're talking about the financial gains and recognition, this year I was going for a financial number, and I was going to hit it no matter what it took. And my son had graduated, was going through graduation, and he didn't need me at home as much. And I hit this pinnacle number, and then I was like, I still got a few months left. Let's hit another number. And each time I'd hit that number, it was a sense of recognition for myself, saying, hey, you did it. Like, this is what you've been working for the last 7 or 8 years, and now you're doing it. But when I got there, it wasn't really that fulfilling. Like, it was kind of like, I told you, like when I ran that half marathon and I finished that half marathon, that's a whole other story we'll get into one of these days. But somebody gave me the medal, and they're like, gosh, are you going to do it again? How do you feel? I was like, I didn't really feel anything. And I found my medal underneath my truck, like seat, like 2 years later. That's kind of how I felt about hitting this pinnacle. And maybe I'm still looking for what recognition do I need to drive, because it isn't financial, I don't think, for me. And I think that after last week, now I'm lost. I'm like out there searching.
What is it really
searching in this world
that I need? And I think it's different for different people. And we talked about this in the gym earlier. I feel like there's a generational difference.
Right.
And maybe we didn't talk about this, but maybe we all are a little more driven by the things when we're starting out and when we're younger. Although I think we are living in a time when we give things for participating, we give things for winning, we give things instead of just allowing ourselves to feel good about doing what we're doing and to feel good about getting better at what we're doing. So there always has to be some sort of attachment at the end of what we do.
Right. And I think what you said too, I think culturally too, you see a difference, like age, like where you grew up. Like, and you're probably from the same era as I was. Like, you had a great game or you did something great. Your parents were like, good job, but these are things you probably could have done a little bit better.
Usually. Or, just show up again next week, right? I was more on the bench than in the game a lot of times.
Well, I bet your parents were like, you look great on the bench. So this is what you can do to get off the bench. And so I look at this era of like new employees coming through, and they're looking to get somewhere faster. And I think COVID kind of helped that a little bit, because the need for workers was there, and it was a whole different sense of needs. But you see kids getting further in their education faster than we probably did. And all of a sudden they're getting jobs with higher pay faster than we did. So the recognition is coming very quickly, but is it coming too quickly? Or let me ask you another question. Are we not recognizing them enough for the tools that they have? Are we saying you haven't put in your time yet?
I do think that happens. I think that happens. There's that job that they're going for, or their promotion, or they feel like they have the skills and know what they want to do. I think you and I are a little bit like that too, right? We know what we want to do. We know what we're good at. And if there's something that feels like it's in the way all the time, I have been willing to wait, knowing that if I look for the right avenue, I look for the right opportunity, it will come. I'm not sure there's that willingness to wait anymore. That actually reminds me of another blog that I was reading. It was Leadership Vision Consulting, and this is what they said about generational differences. I oversaw a youth mentoring network that allowed me to see brilliance and potential of this generation, yet also exposed the disconnect between their expectations and the workforce they're now entering. And it led to disengagement, dissatisfaction, and separation. So leaving sooner.
Right. And I think if you have a conversation with the generational age gap between someone who's 23, 24, maybe all the way into 20, 28, 27, and they're looking at you, and they may be leaving jobs faster because the opportunity isn't as presented to them, so they don't feel like the recognition's there. Because I heard one of the things I heard the most was, I have experience. It may not be as much experience as someone who's been there for 30 years, but I'm willing to do more if they would just give me the opportunity. And that makes me think about, so I'm 45 years old. That makes me look, the first thing that went through my head was, well, you're kind of a liability if you're just going to leave a job so quickly. But then I think about, maybe I need to rethink the way that I've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was the person who, like, you started a job, you got kicked around a little bit, you went and got the coffee, you did all the things, and when the opportunity arose and someone really trusted you, they handed you the keys to the car. But are we leaving some of the recognition out that people deserve at a younger age, or even new in a job, or even new in a relationship, because we're not sure about, did you put in your time?
And is that generational too? And we talked a little bit even earlier today about the difference between recognition and affirmation, and what is that, and what makes one more palatable than the other, or needed more than the other. And I wonder if we're not giving enough affirmation for being on the right track, right? To me, affirmation is acknowledgement that what I'm doing is good work, that what I'm doing matters, that I'm on the right track, not necessarily recognition or public recognition with my peers or others in the company or agency that I work with, But I wonder if we're missing a need to give that affirmation that, hey, this is good work. And so by not affirming anything for the younger generation, they're taking it as indifference.
Right.
Indifference and or even no one cares
Yeah.
about my work or what I'm doing. And I am not sure that's right. I'm not sure we're sending the right signal. So I do think we need to change maybe our approach.
Because, you even look at like, I think I'm pretty blessed to have like a different diverse group of people in my gym and a lot of business owners. And I think a lot of business owners will look at you and say, well, I did this to get here. I'm one of those guys. Like I look at some of my new trainers and I'm like, dude, you need a good solid 3 years to build well, do they? Or do I say, hey, go out and run it. Go out and run your business. Go out and challenge yourself. Like, I trust you enough that you can do this. This is your business. You're just in my gym. Maybe I should listen more.
I don't know. Science would tell us it takes 3 to 5 years, right, to do
Right.
anything really well, to get good at it. But is the science changing? I
Right.
mean, time goes on, right? So is the science changing?
Well, and then it'll be interesting the next couple of years because I think employers were in this like little push and shove. Like people want more money. People want more to be able to work from home. People want more responsibilities. I think business owners are companies are taking over saying you need to come back to work. I'll recognize you in the old school way. And I think that's where you're seeing like a little bit of push and shove going back to work. Yeah. Like I think if we could find a compromise, like the old school, new school, like how do we recognize people for not only for what their accomplishments are, but what potential do they actually really have?
I agree. And I think that then brings up another point and another maybe whole podcast, and that is how do we talk to each other in a difficult conversation, in a business conversation? Because it's one thing for me to talk to my mom or my kids about how I'm feeling at work. It's a whole different ballgame to talk to my boss about how I'm feeling at work or what I need to feel differently. And I think we're missing opportunities by not talking about how we need to talk. Right.
So I'm going to stay on this before we hit the personal issues, because the personal one I think is pretty interesting. How do you get recognition at home or from your own personal life? But some of the guys, like you talk to them, like, and I think people who are getting higher up in their business world, you ask them, well, how do you get recognition? Like, it almost stumps someone. Like, well, what do you mean? Like one guy was like, I think my name's on the door of the company. Or someone will be like,
I think my name's on the door.
or you see somebody's like, well, I've been able to pay the bills for the last 33 years. That's, recognition. And you see, as I think you accomplish more, you get recognition through other success. Like now that I have some younger guys starting their own business and girls training in my gym, I'm seeing recognition if something I can give them helps them to become more successful. And now it's like self-recognition again, where I'm like, and maybe if we could teach ourselves to see those little things, we'd be able to give ourselves more recognition, be more successful, not be so unhappy at some of our jobs. If we would just take the time to see all of the things that we're learning, all the things that we're accomplishing, and all the things we're being successful in.
And see those as success, right? I think that's a huge challenge for you in your job as a personal trainer because people beat themselves up, right? Yep, me, I'm one of them. And we don't see... We're looking for the big change. We're looking for the end game, the end change. And sometimes it takes a long time and we haven't learned how to, you've said this to me, you need to learn how to accept a compliment, right? You need to accept the recognition. So then are we actually missing the recognition that we're getting because we're not equipped to receive it?
Right. I just got my haircut today, and it was interesting because during my haircut, we were talking about this kind of conversation, and one of the things that was said was like, I've put 55% of my money away for savings, so I'm going to have a nice retirement. And my comment was, that's amazing. But like, how come we're not living our life today like it's our retirement? What are we doing? Like, it's good to save because you need to have that. We talked about that last time. But what are we doing right now for self-recognition to make sure that we're almost living our life like we're in retirement today? Instead of seeing our job as something that we have to do, is seeing as a job as something we enjoy. So if we do find those small things, giving ourselves like the high five for for the great tutoring session or the great session that you had or the great leadership conference that you led, or even just being able to keep your desk clean or keep your gym clean, then all of a sudden maybe retirement will be even more exciting because you were so happy with what you were doing before.
And I think that's the drive and the motivation. And when we started the podcast, we said that, right? How does recognition enter into motivation? I think that is the motivation. If we can find that self-affirmation, that selflessness that helps us see the greatness in the little moments. I mean, that's kind of a recurring theme for us. Paying attention to the moments, the little moments, right, because they mean more than sometimes the big ones. And I wonder if that is why at the beginning of your career, and even as we start something new, we think we want to go for the thing, and then we get the thing, and it's not really what we needed. And it might be the trophy, it might be the award, it might be the raise, it might be the promotion, but it's never, again, quite enough. Just like that, just like we talked about with security being an illusion. It's like the affirmation and the recognition is never quite enough. It's elusive. So until we build that from within.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this year, it's coming up, I'm going to find it, because obviously you changed my whole mindset on the last one that we did. So I got to give a shout out to my little guy, Henry. So I asked this question to several people of all age groups, and Henry's 11 years old. He went through some stuff in his life, so I think he has a little bit more intuition sometimes. But I was like, Henry, how do you get like recognition in your 11-year-old life? And he's like, well, it's nice when somebody tells me that I do something well. He goes, it doesn't happen very often, but I take it when it does. And I had a smile. But then
he's 11. He probably isn't paying attention to all of it.
Right. So then he goes to me, he goes, well, then I mean, it was instantaneous thought process, which I was so surprised by 11-year-old. And I probably shouldn't be, because he's probably looking at me, he's like, this is what 11-year-olds do. This is how we think. He's like, if I was to save someone's life, Javier, he goes, I would take a little recognition for that. But he goes, if there was two people and I only saved one person's life, I hope no one gives me any recognition because I didn't save both people's lives. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Because most people were, number one, couldn't answer the question. Number two, most people were like, not that in depth. I was like, thank you, Henry, for giving me that little.
And they might also say, hey, I saved one of the people, right? I took the risk, so I deserve some recognition there. And really, for him, it was more about
setting the bar higher for himself and for all of us, I think. I was like, gosh, Henry, you're really setting that bar high. But I was like, I'd still say thank you. So we go into the next one, and this is where I think it's very interesting, is how do you do it in your personal life? Like, how do you like make sure you're not only getting recognition, but giving recognition to your spouse, to a loved one, to a friend? And I got to tell you this quick story. This week I have a lady who trains, and she's been training with me for a few years. And her and her husband have a great relationship. But like, she's so funny because she comes and trains, and her husband knows that she trains, and she does it for herself. She tells me that all the time. He stopped in to ask he wanted to buy her a present. And I was like, I wonder if she knows, like, he's here. So I had to ask her. I was like, hey, I don't want to ruin your Christmas present, but your husband stopped in and he wanted to get you a present, even though he's not supposed to buy you a present. And she goes, what did you just say to me? I was like, oh man. I was like, she's mad at me because I ruined Christmas for him. And she's like, I'm going to tear up. She goes, I can't believe he came in here today to buy me some sessions. And it's that side out of the blue recognition that comes out where you don't think someone notices. And when they do, it just floors you. And the little tear that was coming out of her almost made me tear up myself, because I think sometimes we miss that.
I totally agree. It just happened to me too. I was talking to Elizabeth right before we came in, and she was so excited because she got an unexpected gift at work from someone she would have not ever imagined or expected a gift from, one at work or any time really. And she said, Mom, honestly, it was because I was nice to them, because I showed up and was there and available and was nice. And so and that is what she said. It was like, I wasn't expecting it. It was totally out of the blue. And that meant more. That was more fulfilling to her than than the raise that she interviewed for and the job that she got, right? It's those little moments that mean more. And I think for her in particular, that said to her, hey, you're showing up in a way that matters, that people see, that people recognize. And she may not have otherwise known that, but that's kind of that affirmation that I was talking about earlier, right? Are we missing our opportunities to say, hey, you are a good presence in this space. You make it better.
Right. And it's not even money material things. It's just those words.
So I think we can do that for people. I think that's one of the things that we do that at home and in our workspaces and just in general in society, being better humans, being kind to each other. I also know that we both have an app that's that's positive affirmations, and that goes off many times during the day. And it's a habit. I don't know that it's so much the words that come up on that app that matter as the habit of getting into the habit of telling ourselves we can, we do, we will, and it matters.
Have you ever had that app just pop up and it's like, you're going to have a great day? And it's like, I don't want to have a great day.
Nope, I'm not.
Like you're wrestling with your phone. You're like, I need to turn that thing off. But it's true. I was glad that you actually gave me that app, because there are days where it says, you are doing a great job. And you're like, you're right. I am, but you just need that reminder, especially after a long week or a long day or a day that hasn't been going well or a situation in your life that just isn't working. I'm going to go back to that story real quick, because I asked another client and his wife that were sitting in front of me, and I told him that story, and my client, the husband, looks at me and goes, you're going to make me get a divorce, because I don't know if I've noticed the things that she likes that much. And she kind of smiles. But it's kind of true, I think, sometimes in myself. Do I not always notice to give that little piece of recognition to somebody? But also, I think sometimes we're hard on ourselves because we do it, but we don't always give ourselves accolades for doing it, or we don't do it enough, or we could give someone else accolades at the same time.
Or we need recognition for doing it, and should we? I almost said, and we shouldn't, but that's judgmental, right? And I don't know that that's true, but should we?
Yeah,
should that stop us from continuing to do it?
I think a lot of times people are going to hear this podcast and think these guys are just way too positive for us. And I hope maybe that's a good fact, because I think there's a lot of times what we're talking about is real stuff. Like, it's hard to have a conversation to realize, am I doing everything in my house to make sure that I'm making sure my loved ones feel good? And am I not only recognizing them in good times, but also in bad times? Am I making sure that I'm recognizing them when things aren't going that well? Am I giving the pep talks that they need when, maybe work's not going that well, or school's not going that well, or they're making mistakes that you wouldn't make mistakes, and recognize them in a way that is a positive way and a learning experience. My son has not got his car fixed for 6 months. It sits on me, and what he had to do is ask me, and I've been trying to help him. But my first thing is to say, hey, that's wrong. But instead of saying, hey, let's figure it out. And,
what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? What's the real issue? Like, maybe instead of just saying, hey, great job on your grades, how's the rest of your life going?
Yeah, true. And I'm having a challenging week. It's been a challenging year, actually, a bit of a season. But you said to me as we were prepping for this, it's important to recognize what we need internally, personally, because when it gets rough, when the days get hard, when the seasons are challenging, you can weather them.
Right.
If you can dig into that self-worth and self-value, and even when you start to challenge yourself, doubt yourself, somewhere in there it lives, so that you can keep going.
I'm going to tell you good job on episode 2, because I was nervous about episode 2, because when you come off episode 1 and you're like, gosh, somebody says you did a good job, you stress out a little. And
we got some good accolades, right?
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. We also appreciate the challenge.
Yeah. So I think we've done a great job talking about this. Is that what we're supposed to tell ourselves that we did? Because you just told me. You just told me that we're supposed to tell ourselves a good job.
I do think, though, we want to end with a challenge again today. And there's 2 things to think about. We've talked about both of them: recognition when you're receiving it, and also recognition when you're giving it. So here's our challenge. Think about where you find value in recognition and affirmation and how important it is or isn't to you and your self-worth, right, and value, so that when you receive it or you don't, either way, your identity and self-worth isn't compromised. And also, know your impact.
Amazing. I'm Javier.
And I'm Tammy.
And this is Shed Talk.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.